All right, today we're going to talk about Project Apollo. Go ahead and write this down. Project Apollo, the main purpose of Project Apollo was to land on the moon. To land on the moon, to get a man on the moon. Remember that we had the Cold War going on. We had Russia and the U.S. going back and forth. Russia, for the most part, is winning all this. They're getting guys out in space before we do. And we had John F. Kennedy Jr. say, by the end of the decade, let's put a man on the moon. So we kind of made that challenge, and we're working for it. Project Apollo. They decided they needed 2 aircraft for this, one to fly to the moon and back, and one to actually land on the moon. The first 10 Apollo missions were for practice. First 10 Apollo missions were for practice. Then Apollo 11, write this down. July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 lands on the moon. So the first 10 kind of built up to that. You're not going to just on the first day, we're going to the moon. On the first day, you kind of build up and gradually get more and more. It's kind of like the first day of track practice. If you're a 2-mile runner, you're not going to probably run 2 miles on the first day. You're going to do something lighter than that, and the next day a little more, and a little more, and a little more. That's kind of what they did here, the first 10 Apollos. And then Apollo 11, we landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, those are the first 2 guys. You've probably heard of the Eagle has landed. The Eagle was the little craft that unhooked from their main spacecraft and it touched down on the moon. It's kind of weird how we went to the moon 6 times in the next couple of years, and then we actually, I don't know if it was the U.S., just in the past year someone went on back to the moon, but I don't know if it was the U.S. or if it was from somewhere else. Write this down. Skylab was the first U.S. space station. Skylab was the first U.S. space station. You don't need to write anything here. But a space station is something that orbits the Earth. So like the moon is a satellite, it orbits the Earth, just goes around and around. So a space station is basically like a science lab that stays in space and continues to orbit the Earth. Skylab was the first one. U.S. astronauts made 3 visits to test the effects of space on the body. So they stayed 28, 59, and 84 days. So they wanted to see what effects on the body being in space would be. The biggest thing is no gravity, okay? If you want to get taller, go to space for a few days, 28 days or whatever, okay? Because what happens is we are always battling gravity. So the cartilage in your back, so you have vertebrae stacked in your back, and in between is cartilage that cushions it, okay? Well, as you're constantly battling gravity, that cartilage gets squished down, especially as you get older. And actually, when you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning, you're as tall as you're going to be that day. Because when you're laying down sleeping, your cartilage kind of decompresses. Your vertebrae decompress, and you get a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch taller. I kind of think of the cartilage in your back as like pillows. If you sleep in the same spot in the middle of your pillow all the time, you get kind of like a head spot, and it kind of squishes down, and you kind of have to like puff your pillow back up. If you have a new pillow, it's nice and full. Well, that's your cartilage. So being in space kind of takes the pressure off of all your joints, and it allows you to get a little taller, at least temporarily. Another effect on the body is because you're not battling gravity, your bones thin out. Your bones get thinner. Okay? Right now, you run, you jump, all that stuff. Your body, the more you do that stuff, the thicker your body makes your bones. Okay? That's why you encourage like little kids and even people your age to exercise and drink plenty of milk so your bones are strong and thick. Well, if you're not battling gravity, your body is going to make your bones thinner. Because it's like, well, why do we need to make them thick? We don't use them. Another thing, similar thing happens with your muscles. If you don't use them, if you're not fighting gravity, your muscles are going to shrink. Okay? I'm using my muscles right now standing here in front of you. I'm fighting gravity. If I wasn't using my muscles, I'd end up on the floor. So your muscles will shrink. Maybe you've had a cast on your arm or your leg or something for a few weeks, and when you take it off, your arm looks way smaller than the other one because you stopped using it. That's called atrophy. Your body says, oh, why do we need to have muscle on this arm? We don't use it anyway. Let's use it for something more important. So some effects on astronauts being into space is they got taller. Their bones density started shrinking, and their muscles got smaller. A few years later, 6 years later actually, Skylab fell down, burned up in the atmosphere over Australia. So that space station lasted 6 years before it naturally fell out of orbit. Because it's man-made and we put it in there, it eventually falls out of orbit through the atmosphere and burns up. You don't need to write this, but the Russians had a space station, Mir, that was 1986, and that lasted a little longer, about 15 years ago before it fell down. Today we have the International Space Station. I would write that down. Today, International Space Station, you might hear it as ISS. We started building it in 1998. It was finally complete in 2011. We were scheduled to use it only until 2015, but it is still up there. So you can see as time has gone on, these have lasted longer because our technology is better, and we were able to put it into orbit better. I would write this down, a space shuttle. A space shuttle is an airplane-like thing, and the purpose is to reuse it for 100 missions. So a while back we talked about a goal of astronauts and of NASA was to land on Earth. Well, they basically took this airplane-like thing, strapped it to a rocket, and then flew it back home and landed like a plane would. And we wanted to reuse this many times. You don't need to write this. 1981 was the first time. Let's call that good.